day everyone, this is Rose Ibanez or Rose A. Ibanez, and for today's video, we're gonna share with you together with my partners for today, Marlon Estupa and Kuya Labor, my dearest friend. So for today, I really love to introduce to you guys the Pride and Prejudice. In this entire video, you will learn what was inside the Pride and Prejudice, what's our favorite characters, what's our favorite scene in the Pride and Prejudice, and what we learn in the entire movie. So, keep on watching. Let's start it on. Let's get it on.
So, this is a summary of the story Pride and Prejudice. The story begins with Mr. Bingley moving into the most luxurious Netherfield Park mansion in the area, together with his sister and their friend Mr. Darcy. Bingley is young, rich, and single. It seems like it's a perfect solution for Bennet family, who has 5 single daughters and preoccupied with getting married to secure the financial well-being of their family. One day, Jane Bennet was invited for a date, but she becomes ill once she arrived. So her sister, Elizabeth Bennet, comes to Netherfield to take care of her. That's how the two couples, Jane and Mr. Bingley, and Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy, met and developed an interest to each other. Later, Mr. Bingley and his sister visit Bennet's mansion to invite them to the ball they are hosting. At the same time, Mr. Colin, which the cousins of the Bennet family and the heirs of their estate, he wrote a letter sometime before announcing his visit with the intention to choose one of the Bennet girls as his wife. He selfishly expects that all of them will want to marry him to keep their family mansion, and is surprised when Elizabeth turns down his proposal at the ball. After that, determined to find himself a wife, William Collins proposes to Charlotte, who agrees simply out of the social pressure to get married. However, his act did change the way she thinks about him, and the dislike she had for him changes into something more complex and deep. The next day, Darcy writes a long letter to Elizabeth in which he comes clean, sincerely explains why he interfered in the relationship between Jane and Mr. Bingley, and explains that the story Mr. Wickham tells about him are lies. Elizabeth changes her attitude toward Darcy, but doesn't initiate contact to tell him. The next time the lovebirds see each other is when Lizzie travels with her aunt and uncle to visit the Pemberley estate that belongs to Darcy. She hears people saying good things about him, and Darcy himself behaves quite gallantly around people. One day, Darcy sees Elizabeth in tears after she finds out that her younger sister, Lydia, had run away with Officer Wickham. Luckily for all, Uncle Gardiner was quickly able to find the lovers in London, and pretty easily managed to convince the young man to marry the girl he had seduced. Only later, Elizabeth would realize that Wickham agreed to marry Lydia because Darcy had paid off all his debt. The story finishes with a happy ending with Mr. Bingley along with his sisters and Darcy come to Netherfield Park again. Darcy proposes to Elizabeth for the second time, and she agrees, and they move into a pompous Pemberley house. Mr. Bingley marries Jane, and the two live happily ever after. So, that is the summary of the story Pride and Prejudice.
Jane Austen was born on December 16, 1975 in Stevenston, Hampshire, England. Jane Austen was died on July 18, 1870. 1970. She was an English writer who first gave a modern character through the treatment of ordinary people in everyday life. Jane published 4 novels during her time. First is Sense and Sensibility in 1811. Second, The Pride and Prejudice in 1830. Third one is Mansfield Park at 1840. Emma in 1850. Her novels was defined as the era novels of manner. Also become a timeless classic because her novels are also very known like in our years for now. Even though after her death, like it's how many years since she was died. But it also become a timeless classic because her novels is also very known after her death. Like it's how many years since she was dead. But her works was awesome, still awesome.
One of the most issues in Jane Austen's novel Pride and Prejudice is love. As one might expect from a romantic comedy, love and marriage. In particular, the novel focuses on the different ways love may grow or disappear and whether or not society has a room for romantic love and marriage to go together. Throughout the story, it becomes more apparent that the novel is arguing that love based on genuine compatibility is ideal, like Miss Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy's love story become potentially right, and their love grows as the novel continues and their life continues. We also see love at first sight, like the lovebirds Miss Jane and Mr. Bingley's scene at the ball when they first met. Also, in line of love, marriage of convenience, like when Mr. Collins proposed marriage to Miss Charlotte, Lizzie's friend, for the reasons that Mr. Collins has to accomplish, or that Lady Catherine's demand for him despite whether there's love or not. As Miss Charlotte said to Lizzie when she talked about her marriage to Mr. Collins, and got argued because Lizzie wants to cut off Charlotte's and Mr. Collins' love, but Charlotte said to Lizzie, "Not all of us can afford to be romantic." In my opinion, in the novel Pride and Prejudice, status is very important to them because that's the way of living. Women and men should have title, property, and money. Ultimately, the novel is a strong recommendation of love as a basis for marriage or not. As a person and as a student, I believe that one of us has its own definition of love.
I advise you guys to read Pride and Prejudice if you want to know what was the life before, what were their way of living, and also this is very common in the story, like what is the way of courting, how did Mr. Darcy courted Miss Elizabeth, and how did Miss Elizabeth accepts Mr. Darcy despite of how their life was very different from a rich man to a not so poor woman to become to each other. If you want to know that why they become together, what were the struggles they've been through to become together, who were the antagonists, who were the protagonists, if you want to know really what's inside of Pride and Prejudice, I bet read Pride and Prejudice because there's a lot of things you should dig in, and there's a lot of things you will learn to how your life must be and how you manage to know the person before you accept it in their life, because marriage there is very important.